Welcome to Culture, Worldview, and Origins. This series is on critical thinking skills in science. We're in Chapter 5, Man's Origin, Session Number 1. Man's Origin. That's kind of a nebulous title. I just put a title on it so that I could have a starting point. But what we're going to go over in this chapter is about who man is, that he has the capacity to critically think. Can we trust in his capacity? Where did that capacity come from? So we're really talking about the origins of man and about his capacity to think, and is it trustworthy? So that's where we're starting. We're Tim and Holly, and you're welcome to communicate with us through the addresses on the board there. But we're going to start. There's two cultural perspectives on origin of man. And man's origin from a Western cultural perspective has to do with the Western science then, and it has to do with the consensus model that is reigning today, and that would be the evolutionary science. So if we're talking about evolutionary science, what would be the level of trustworthiness of our capacity to critical think? Well, this is just one comment came across. It says, it's talking about the mind. It says, in its colossal size, exclusive identity, marvelous eccentricity, the human brain became our crowning achievement. That is the difference, according to the evolutionary timeline, between us and the animal world, is that we are part of the animal world, but the distinguishing difference is the crown that we wear on our shoulders, which is the colossal size of our mind, our brain. Now, being a materialist, the materialists measure capacity as intelligence. So if we have a higher capacity brain or larger size, then that measures in intelligence or capacity for intelligence. So this is what the evolutionary model promotes, is that man is a cosmic accident, and that whatever he is, it's only for a short time, because it's going to continue evolving to different levels, higher levels. So the question would be then, okay, so the mind that the evolutionists are working with is a mind put together by random chance and events and selection among those random events. So how do we know to what capacity or to what level we can trust our minds, and are they deceiving us? That is the Western cultural evolutionary scenario. But in this series, we're going to assume the non-Western, man's origin from a non-Western cultural biblical perspective. And that biblical perspective is from a non-Western cultural viewpoint. So what we're going to do now is get into, okay, the non-Western biblical means that they started with Scripture, and that they, from Scripture, then followed the details of Scripture. The obedience is that their God created them and created them to be obedient to His will. And that's what we're gonna dive into in this series. Again, not to disappoint anybody, but here is the image of the world and the glasses and the interpretation, and that interpretation is jagged and colored because it's personal, because it is through the lenses of the one viewing the world, and that though it be the same world, there's many different world views that color the perception of that world. And so that's what we have from Stephen Jay Gould. He says, first facts do not come to us as objective items seen in the same unambiguous way by all reasonable people, but theory, habit, prejudice, and culture all influence the facts we choose to observe and the way in which we perceive them. So how does that theory, habit, prejudice, and culture influence the perception of the world below us, or the world that we're looking at? So how does that factor into the reliability of us being able to think critically? When thinking critically then could be a cultural viewpoint, or the factors of theory, habit, and prejudice and culture all factoring in. That's what we're going to be looking at in the further chapters ahead of us too, is that critical thinking from a Western viewpoint, what is it? And from a non-Western viewpoint, what could it be? Here's the house, and this is what we had built before, was our whole system, starting with culture, and then epistemology, our sources of reliable knowledge, and then our metaphysics, answering the questions of metaphysics, and then up to metaphysics and methods, or epistemology in methods, and then to logic and axiology. So we're starting with this question of man's origin. We're starting at ground zero, which is the Weltbild, which is the world picture that is based on life experiences, beliefs, whatever happened within that formative time and period, which includes our culture. Because culture is not just an abstract term, but it comes from a verb, which is to cultivate. And so we can be cultivated, or are cultivated, in a certain way, but that means too that we can be recultivated. And I believe that's what happens or does happen to my students that come in from the rural area. They are cultivated in a certain way of thinking, a certain way of processing information, and then they are cultured when they come into the city and go to school. Okay, so we're taking the position of a non-Western cultural tendencies. And what are those? What would be the major factors within them? And that's what we have is the universal domains of creator and created. What does that mean? What's that opposed to? The opposing viewpoint would be the Western cultural tendency, which believes that there is a natural world that can be separated from the supernatural, and that those are two different domains and two different entities. And so we all live in the natural world, and some of us accept the supernatural that is over and above that world. That is not what a non-Westerner would believe, is that they would not believe that there's anything natural about this world, or that you cannot separate into natural and supernatural. They believe that there was a creator, whether that be spirits or a supreme God or what have you, but that creator created the world. And so there is no natural part of this, because the creator is not natural, and that which was created was not natural, because it is from the creator. So all of it has to do with creator. It's the creator creation, not natural, supernatural. They believe in the spirit. They believe in the spiritual dimension, to the point that the spiritual dimension dominates the material dimension. But the spirit and the matter exist within the same dimension, same domain. There's no separation between them, like as if they're two different entities. So if you're saying, well, you've got to separate church and state, and they're kind of like, only a Westerner could do that, because to practice state, you practice law, you're practicing your values. And your values come from your belief system. So they're kind of like, no, you can't separate church and state. You can't separate spirit and matter. It's a package deal. Universal operating system. How does the world operate? The Western assumption is that there is a natural world and maybe a supernatural world or dimension, and that the universe that we live in is a closed system encapsulating that natural world, with the supernatural, if it exists outside that world, which for some then it can intervene, it can come and go, or it can't even get in. That is the Western. For the non-Western, it's an open system. And an open system means there is no barriers between the spirit world and the matter, physical world. And that open system means that that system is governed by the Creator or other created power sources. They tend to be believers. They believe in the spiritual dimension. Now, there are those that say that, we are not believers. We take things only as reliable knowledge, as facts. We do not just believe in something. But we all start with a parting, with a point that we have to assume that we believe to be true, which makes us all believers at that starting point. What a non-Westerner believes in also is the external authority. What is their source of reliable knowledge? Now, there's those four sources where you have intuition, you have external authority, you have rational thinking, you have empiricism, observation. So they choose an external authority, which makes them dependent on that authority and cooperative within the whole community. So those are the domains or the tendencies that is going to be the base of our thinking and what we should assume as biblical thinkers. So what would be the source of reliable knowledge? The primary source. We got the culture. If it's a non-Western culture, then what's its source? Again, we have the four. Intuitive knowledge, authoritarian knowledge, logical knowledge or reason, and empirical knowledge or senses. So it's human intuition, it's external authority, it's human reasoning, or human senses. And so three of the four have to do with the human, whereas the one has to do with an external authority. So which one would we choose based on non-Western? The chosen source of reliable knowledge would be authority. God, as revealed by special and general revelation. Now again, this is kind of something I just need to reinforce. The assumption is God, then as revealed by general and special revelation. Those two, general and special revelation, are a product of believing in God and believing that God revealed himself. I don't believe that there is justification to take general and special revelation to prove the existence of God. That is trying to work the equation backwards, which we have to assume something to even work the equation or to be able to think by. So I do not believe in that we have to prove the existence of God, because he is our assumption, but we can use general revelation to know God, to know his attributes. The ground zero, the culture. It's non-Western, creator created, it is spirit matter, it is open system, it is not predictable. Okay, so that's what we're working with. That is the perspective that I, as a Westerner, must take into consideration and must try to maintain, because that is the non-Western mindset. Again, we're just going back to how this fits in, is that we're starting with culture, cultural perspective, and then we're going up to our source of reliable knowledge. What is it? And non-Western wise, that would be biblical. Then our basic beliefs. Well, then you're going through that God exists, and that he revealed himself, and that he is a personal God, and that he is transcendent and immanent, all the way on up. So then that is the house, and we're working using the components that we've already built into the house structure. Okay, so we're setting the groundwork for thinking, for being able to understand what is man's origin. We're assuming a non-Western, external authority, biblical parameters from a mindset of cooperation and respect. Respect for the God that we say that we worship, and a subjection to his will, and our community, in that we are community, not competitive against each other. We're cooperative in serving our Creator. That's session 1. We're in chapter 5, man's origin, but we're really talking about man and his capacity. What is his origin of capacity to critical think? So we're in the series of critical thinking skills in science, and we're Tim and Holly. And if you'd like to communicate with us, you can do so through the addresses that are on the board. Thank you again for joining us.